I have to imagine with your first name, there's all kinds of cool things that people could do with their phones in terms of like memes and stuff. I mean, just the name Brittany itself just radiates, whoops, you did it again type of thing, right?
Yeah.
So how much play on that name can I have in the course of this
Yes.
podcast?
You can have any
Unlimited?
play on the name. Yes.
Well, listen, to your, you shouldn't be too worried because I went to public school in California, which means I don't have a lot of horsepower up here anyway. So introduce yourself to anybody that's listening that doesn't know who you are.
Yeah. So I'm Brittany. Been in the data center space for 7 years.
Oh, yeah?
Prior to that, semiconductor. So lived all over the world, married, live in Arizona, no kids. I have stepkids that are older, and we had a grandson, which is wild.
No kidding.
2 years old. I refuse to be called.
I was like,
anything
so
but
your
a
grandma?
No, we're not there yet.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
been in construction my whole.
Tell us the story. Like,
life.
so where are you from? From Michigan?
I was born in Arizona.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I think you actually told me that on
Yeah.
Uber ride. So
Yeah.
what part? Scottsdale?
Yeah, I was born in Mesa, grew up in Scottsdale, did high school.
You were at school, like college in Arizona?
Yep. So was going to go to a private college. I was really close to my grandmother, and she got really sick, and I was going to go to SMU in Dallas, and I switched because I wanted to be at home. So I ended up at ASU, and I ended up starting as a journalism major.
Whoa.
Yeah. I love to write. I love to talk to people. I love to understand people. And so I thought that was a great option. I was a year in. My grandfather sat me down, so he's been in construction, and said, I don't think this is going to work for you.
He said you couldn't be a journalist?
He said, I don't think it's
like
going
that's
to
probably
work
what
for
you
you.
heard.
Yeah, that's what I heard. So I switched, and I went to engineering school and construction, and it was this little tiny trailer now. If you go to
At ASU?
It's huge and it's beautiful, and they've rebuilt it. Well, when I went, it was very tiny.
Yeah.
And I remember walking in, and I was maybe one of 5 females, probably. And, everybody was all the guys were kind of at their tables, and I walked in, and they're like, are you lost? What are you doing here?
Journalism's this way.
What are you doing here? So by choice, I went into construction.
And your grandfather, hold on. So your grandfather was in construction. So he helped influence this because your relationship with your grandparents?
Yeah.
Now, is your whole lineage from Arizona as well? I mean,
Everybody's from Michigan.
okay, so how did that connect back?
Yeah. So my mom moved after college. My parents moved to Arizona.
For what was the industry back then? Why would someone go to Arizona back those days?
I think you're just young and wanted
The sun?
Just wanted to move out of Michigan.
Because Michigan's cold as hell?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
enough said.
and they opened up pizza restaurants, and they had business. They're in their early 20s. They have me.
Your family started a pizza biz?
Yeah.
Like the Detroit style pizza?
Yeah,
That's
in Arizona.
Is it bomb?
It's closed now. But yeah, so I was 2. They got divorced. And my dad left, and my mom and my grandparents and were all in Arizona. So my mom worked full time, 70 hours a week, raising me.
Yeah, your brothers and sisters?
Only child. So it was just my mom and I. So it's still, to an extent, just, she's building a house on our property.
Oh, that's amazing.
So it's kind of coming full circle, with your parents. And
well, it's interesting how they even had a massive influence over, and your mom's parents, had a pretty massive influence of shifting from journalism to construction.
yeah. Yeah. He's a big developer in Michigan and in construction. And, I grew up around it. I never wanted to do it.
But what did he say that made you want to? Like, what was it? Like, how do you message that?
I think, growing up, I didn't think that there was anything that I couldn't do, right? There was no, him and my mom were like, you can do whatever you want, right? And I think maybe he just kind of said, why wouldn't you do this? You know so much about it. It's a great industry to be in. And I'm like, well, why would I go be in construction, right?
So what was the answer?
And I don't know what clicked. It just clicked, and I said, okay.
Was it just like faith, where you had enough confidence in his judgment?
Yeah.
Who said that you can do it there?
Yeah.
He saw that there was an opportunity.
Yeah.
Because there's a big blind spot for.
Yeah.
Simply
And he's
standing.
like, you can do it. And so, he's And I'm like, okay. So I did it. And
Any regrets?
no, I mean, I've tried to leave construction a couple times because it's fast paced and it's,
Oh, it's a beatdown.
it's
It's combat. It's battle.
yeah, it consumes you.
100%. You have to remain omnipresent. You can't take your eyes off a program in this space.
No.
You go and take your eyes off and turn to the left for a day or two. You could go $500,000 backwards in a second.
Yeah.
So it's a very intense.
Yeah.
I'm sure I want to understand the semiconductor side. So from the construction side, Arizona State, is it? You said it's nice now because I have a son who's a senior who thinks that he wants to get into construction.
It's beautiful
He's
school.
looking at
They
ASU.
like rebuilt it. It's one of the best construction schools, right? I
to
mean,
know.
there's not too many. There's more now than there was then, but yeah, it's great.
So did you get a degree in like construction management? Was it some sort of
Yeah.
like no shit?
It's a part of the engineering school.
I got you.
And so you kind of do like the 200-300 level, all the engineering classes.
That's awesome though.
So you get to kind of everything. You get to see everything in the engineering school.
Do you feel like when you graduated for a degree in construction from, like, did you have the opportunity to do enough internships in the summer times? Or like,
Yeah.
how were you getting the practical?
Yeah. So I did. You have to. So your junior and senior year, you have to do internships. It's required. So my junior year, I was an intern at a small tenant improvement company, and we built a bank. And I still drive by that bank, and I like show people in Arizona, like, this was the first bank. It was so
First
exciting.
project.
Yeah, because you're an intern, you're there at the 2 a.m. concrete pours, right? And, so you spend a lot of time there.
Especially
Yeah.
coming into the space when
Yeah.
you're the F&G.
Yeah, you're there.
In prison, I think the technical term is you're the bitch. Right?
Yeah.
Not boy or girl. Like we all start from somewhere, but when
Yeah.
you are the 2 a.m. You're like, someone's got to take care of the paperwork at that
Yeah.
time. Send in the F&G.
Yeah.
So that was you
That was
as
me.
an intern?
That was me. I stayed on through college, like through the junior year. My senior year, I was introduced to a company called Intel, and I'm like, what? I don't want. Why are you talking to me? I don't know. You don't do construction. I had no idea,
Oh,
right?
wow.
Because you think you're gonna go work for a general contractor or
I guess so.
maybe
yeah.
a sub. Like that's what you think the construction industry is, right? Or at that time, that's what I thought it was. And so Intel approached me, did an internship as a project manager doing, small projects in Chandler. And I stayed.
What were they introducing you to? Because I mean, even a bank, I've not done banks, but I've done pretty sophisticated hospitals and, broadcast stations and stuff. But a bank probably has a lot of cool stuff with the vaults and securities.
And then at Intel, I mean, it was small labs,
That's what-
small retrofits, right?
very dense in the MEP though.
Oh, yeah. I always say if you can survive Intel, you can survive any project or tech company out there.
Anybody that's worked for Intel, because I have not, but everybody that I know that has basically says that. It's like it's the ultimate pressure test.
It's ultimate, and you learn so much, right? I mean, because I think we tried every compensation model, every, delivery model, right?
They have the most aggressive cyclical shifts, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And because of that, that's why they weaponize labor in such a crazy way. And, they probably in their own planning stages, in the earliest stages, realize that they don't know what they don't know. And there's going to be times where they're going to pay 2 or 3x premium on tradesmen or something for a small period of time because they're fighting labor restraints against, hyperscale data center users or something, especially in that market.
In Arizona, it's
Tough market.
Yeah, it's hard. So
you did that internship as a senior too? So you're kind of running
I
that.
just stayed my senior year, and I worked like 20 or 30 hours a week while I was finishing school, and it was great. I mean, it was a great job.
Sure.
Got paid and I stayed.
Was there a program there that, like, hey, when you graduate, then you roll into a different thing, or you just kind of slid into that?
There's a guy that's now in the data center industry that said when you graduate you can come full time, and I switched from construction to supply chain, but it's still construction supply chain, right? So still in the industry, so I switched, and that's how I started.
What made you make that switch?
Timing, honestly, because the person that had hired me was leaving to go to Oregon, and I had
It's just
trust.
opportunity.
Yeah, it was just opportunity. But it was great, right? Because I became the glue between all the engineering and construction, and I learned, so much from it. I don't, what I went through and what I learned at Intel is what kind of made me understand the industry and move into data centers. So, I lived in Israel for a couple of years. My
What's
husband and I got married, and we took an assignment in Israel. They were building a new, factory there.
that was? Oh, Intel was. Okay, so that explains it. So is your husband in construction too? Is he in
Yeah.
the same industry as us, or is he still on
He's still
semi?
at Intel. Yeah.
No kidding.
25 years
So just getting
engineer.
that's a long time to be
Yeah.
at Intel, right?
A long time.
So he probably knows where a lot of bodies are buried and
Yeah.
stuff. Like, obviously, so he's in construction like you, and you
Yeah.
guys met at that thing. So you guys were on the same program, and they let you guys go to Israel together. What part of Israel?
Well, we lived in Tel Aviv, but the project was in Kiryat Gat, which is like, 12 kilometers from Gaza,
Oof,
to put that in perspective.
a little
So,
bit of risk.
yeah, and ended up, we were there for maybe 3 weeks. And that's when I think it was 2011 when a conflict started. And so we lived in a hotel together, first year of marriage, working together and with bombs,
Oh, for sure.
You
What
know.
was it like for you the first time that you walked down the street in Israel and were looking at, because it's a citizen soldier.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody there
Yeah.
serves,
Yeah.
right? And if you look at the map, you have this huge, I mean, it's all these Muslim nations, and then you have this little tiny dot that's Israel, right? And it's so small, and their culture is conditioned, to where it's normal to see young people walking up and down the street all the time in uniforms, wearing, semi-automatic weapons on their shoulder or
Yeah.
on their hip, right? I mean, even when our submarine would pull into Haifa,
Yeah.
and I remember walking down and I was like, I've never seen, no one would be used to seeing that here in the United States.
No.
Even in Texas, if you were
Yeah.
just walking down the street and you saw people strapped all the time, you'd be like, wait a second.
What's going on?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So are you part of that tribe, or religiously did you align to that area too? So was it accretive to you spiritually to be there, or was it just about the project?
I was raised Jewish,
Uh-huh.
and so there was something there, but it wasn't, intentional. But I understood some of the culture and, the holidays and things. So it helped me,
Appreciate it more?
appreciate it, understand it. I got to explain it to my husband a lot, right? Because if you don't understand, right?
Sure.
But I think I was there, and I got so ingrained into the culture that actually, which I'm sure you experienced too, when I came back to the States, it was super hard.
I think everybody that's been an expat or was
Yeah.
worked outside, the two narratives that I always get back from those people is the transition back, like you said, it's hard,
Yeah.
right? Because there's like a whole other world that people don't see, because the optics that they view this world through is
Yeah.
so limited, right? And then the other part is it normally it'll make it, most of the time it makes people appreciate. I mean, look, is America perfect? Absolutely not. But I mean, it's great. It's still the best, right? But when you complain about certain things and then you go to some of those other
Yeah.
countries, you come back and you're like, especially you, if you're staying in a hotel 16 miles from the Gaza Strip, you said, or something, imagine living underneath that
Yeah.
pressure every day of knowing that you're surrounded by people that,
Well, you become very reactionary, right? Like you're just reacting to whatever's happening that day.
I feel like the attention to details. When I was over there, it just seemed like everyone was very deliberate and very intentional. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, you have to be.
Yeah, people didn't waste a lot of time. I found value in that. There's groups that we do work with right now that are building data centers over there
Yeah.
too. So there must be a lot going on.
Yeah.
But in that 2-year stint that you were there, did you get a chance to go out and like go see the Holy Land? And,
Oh yeah, it was great. I mean, after the 5 months of running to bomb shelters 5 times a day,
Crazy.
so you couldn't really go out and see much. So after we did that, I just said we got to make this, something that we'll remember. So every weekend we were traveling somewhere, because we were there and that's kind of what
Outside the country? Or
outside the country, inside the country,
Cool.
and so it was great. I mean,
What were some of the cool places you saw?
I think the favorite place we went to was Istanbul for sure.
There.
We did Russia because
Which
I
part?
thought we did St. Petersburg, and where else were we?
Well, even then, was that awesome?
It was awesome.
I want to go there.
I was super like in like Latvia and like some of the smaller
Yeah.
countries. It's really cool. We did it because I thought, oh well, if I don't do it now, I don't know if I'm gonna make it back.
Life is short. You definitely
Yeah.
want to do that.
So we did all that and we traveled a ton and it was the best experience. Like it changed my life. And I always tell people like, if you get the opportunity to live outside the United States and see a different culture and world, it will really change. I think your empathy level, your appreciation.
Have more grace with people.
And more patience with
Yeah.
people because you don't know what they're going through. So yeah, I did that and we came back and
So, well, how old are you during this time? Because it sounds like you'd been at Intel your senior year, and then you were there probably for another couple of years in Arizona before you shifted over there. So you're
yeah, I was
early
there
20s?
for like 5. I was 28, 27, 28 when I went to Israel.
So that's a perfect time because maturity-wise, like professionally, you're mature. You're,
You have enough experience that
Yeah.
you've like, you know, the industry, kind of the players, especially at Intel, right? I had been there long enough that I knew how to navigate things, and yeah. So then then was there and came back, and
well, why did you guys come back? Was it just like a
it was
program
the
was
end.
over?
Like it was the idea was that I helped kind of set up some of the contracts and supply chain, because at Intel contract with a general contractor and they do multi-prime, right? So, I mean, imagine
Yeah.
negotiating with Israeli subcontractors, right? Unit rate contracts.
Dang.
So, and they don't care, right? Bombs are coming. They're like, whoa, we're still talking, right?
And that has no impact on schedule. So, like,
Yeah, they don't care.
we have inclement weather and bombing incorporated into our contingency in the schedule.
Well, and everybody, when that stuff happens, right? The first thing that happens is a lot of people leave, right? Work because they have to go to the military, and it just kind of keeps moving.
What was that like? I didn't even think about that. So a lot of the people that are working as civilians are also still like reservists or
Yeah,
something, right?
they have to go.
So what does that impact on a program from a dynamics or a schedule base?
I mean, you just keep going. Like, I don't know how to explain it anymore. Like, I think, it's tight. Like, the culture of the community is really tight. So, if somebody's there, somebody else steps up and we just kind of keep going.
And this is a pretty cool story. So when you're there, you and your husband, or was he on the same project?
Yeah.
Okay, so was there a lot of women on that program? Was Intel pretty big on?
Yeah. I mean,
Were you starting to see? Was it even then? I mean, like, there was people at this conference, this week that we were having, and I actually got pulled to the side by a guy, and he was upset with me because there just simply wasn't enough females, either on stage or just in attendance. And I'm like, hey, listen, I share your frustration. I wish I could do more, but how do we get more people like you that shift from journalism,
yeah, into this.
But it's an awesome, I mean, do you have any regrets that you abandoned journalism? You can still be a writer, right?
No, like I can do that when later, right? And I still do it, right? But at the time, I don't think that if I didn't know that it was possible, there's no way. If somebody wasn't helping me, or letting me kind of like see a different avenue, I would have just stuck with like, I'm going to be a journalism major, I'll go into business,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's the difference is that, I think we need to make it people to be aware of the industry and know that it's not just men that can
100%.
be here, right?
What
But
is-
if they don't know,
Well, so that's only half the problem, right?
Yeah.
You're right. Not knowing is one thing, but like I was telling you, I know a ton of people in this industry,
yeah,
and there are women in this space that not only do we have a high amount of respect or reverence for, but they really know their shit inside and out. I found that you have kind of almost two types of women in this space: those that are they're not exposed enough to it yet to have that level of confidence to where they're going to be assertive enough or have a command presence enough in that, and that's fine. I mean, plenty of guys are like that too.
Yeah.
We have to like been battle tested in some ways before we're ready to stand with all those convictions. But there's another side, which is, I think there are women I've ran into that are massively sophisticated and armed to the teeth, and they got to be that way because there was a lady once. I mean, I have a lady named Mackenzie on my team, and she went to UT, architect, works on the Compass program and supported a program for them. I'm sure I'm allowed to say these things, in Israel. And but she has worked on programs for us all over. And one time I was asking her something, like I ask, she's a leader on our team and she leads, men and women. And I said, hey, how can I do better? How can I do more? And she's like, look, stop putting people in positions because it's she's like, if that's the right person, then bring the right person in. But if you put someone in a position that some may view and be like, oh, she's a woman, that's why they put her there, then that's how they got that chip on their shoulder. And that's how they got their grit. Because they're like, I don't want you to think that I just got put in this position because they were checking a box and needed a female. I fucking earned this position. Yeah. I came in early, I stayed late, and I suffered for 2 years on a program in Israel or whatever it is. But I've noticed like there is nothing more dangerous on a program than one of those people that have been, they felt like they were being trivialized for something and they had something to prove. Yeah. And because of that, they were able to weaponize that brain to make them leader. I mean, you're the first female on our podcast. Yeah. And you're not the first female I've asked. I mean, I asked you how long ago, right? Yeah. And not everybody wants to be on stage. No. Not everybody wants to be on a podcast, right? So one is you need to have, if not grandparents, you need mentors. You need someone who's going to help you discover this outside of journalism or marketing or whatever else is more traditional, prevalent that you see. This is an awesome industry. Yeah. Just construction in general is fun because it's chaos. Yeah. Like, it's 2 days.
Multitasking at its finest, right? Like it is, you switch your brain from one thing to the other constantly.
Because it's designed like that. Yeah. It's designed to never have 2 days the same, right? I mean, look at the schedule. Okay, tomorrow we're doing this. Yeah. You're right. So I love I call it a dynamic, not a static environment where like the Army guys that I have on my team are like, dude, it's kinetic. And that's what they lived by in the military. Their conditioning in their mind was everything's got to be, the more kinetic, the better. That Jesse on my team and Anthony from my team are like, I feel better when people are shooting and throwing grenades at me than if I'm in a chilled environment where I don't have any pressure pushing against us. Yeah. So I think going back full circle is when you went there and you're in your late 20s, were you that confident in yourself at that point, or is that where you were learning it? Is that where you discovered it?
I think I was that confident in like my knowledge and skill, but I learned a ton being over there. I learned how to influence people that, first of all, I'm in a different country. English is not the primary language, right? And here I come, right? And they're like, why are you
blonde
here?
Female that's this tall.
And they're like, why are you here, right? What? We got this, right? Like, we're tough. We all were in the military, right? Like, sure. Why'd they send you here, right?
You're like, hold my beer. I got this.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it was good. Like, looking back at it, it really challenged me to say, okay, so either you, but in that culture, right? What I also learned is that if you don't push back,
you have to be assertive.
You have to be assertive. And you can do it in a professional way, but you have to be assertive.
I think that's a thing that outside of the United States, I've learned. I've done projects everywhere but in Asia, right? Yeah. So all throughout, from Brazil to every part of North America, Canada, all throughout Europe, Middle East. Culturally, I find a lot of value in that because they feel bolder being more. I think that if I use the word like confrontation, most people are like, that's not a good thing. And I'm like, actually, it's a very healthy friction. It's a healthy thing. And it pushes or advances, standards higher. They welcome those things more outside the United States, I felt, than here. I feel like sometimes...
we used to, right? I mean, I remember going through a class at Intel. It was called Constructive Confrontation. And they literally taught you how to confront people.
How to trade paint.
Yeah.
It's necessary.
It's so necessary.
And people... It's necessary for you to be able to go push the standard, and it's necessary for those being challenged to understand that it is a challenge and not an attack. And it's hard for people to take criticism without viewing it as an attack. Yeah, it's something that it's a blind spot for people like you and I now as we're senior, because you have, how many people do you influence with a decision that you make, right? Yeah. And some of those people that they haven't arrived at that point professionally where they realize like, why is everyone telling me everything I'm doing is wrong? And they're like, they're not. They're coaching you and helping you make what you're doing better. Not that you're doing it wrong. You can be right or you can be better, but you cannot be both. So which one do you want to be? Yeah. In your early stage professionally, emotionally, you're the most insecure.
Right. Yeah.
because, and if you're a woman, I'm sure it's even worse because you have something
But
to
I
prove.
mean, to an extent too, I still am, right? Like I could be in a meeting and I say something and I kind of look at the reaction of my team or my team members and that night I'm like,
For real?
yeah, I think about it.
So does that,
Could I have done something different? Did I not motivate them in the right way? But if I don't stop thinking like that, then I stopped kind of developing myself, right? Because I'm
yeah.
not perfect, right? No one's perfect. And so if I don't understand the mistakes or even think about it, then I'm not growing either.
So how did you arrive to that point professionally to where you are so self-aware that you view it like that? Because we are all students. None of us have arrived yet. I mean,
No.
iteratively, we're trying to reinvent ourselves weekly, or if
Yeah.
not daily, to try
Daily.
to. So when you go into those things, do you like that? Do you thrive more when you have someone that kind of cocks their head and is
Yeah.
like, yeah. So it either makes, I mean, that pressure makes diamond or splat marks, right? So
Yeah.
walk me through that. And where did you learn that grit? Because that's what we need. This podcast is for you.
Yeah.
It's not for me to mansplain this shit. Like, I have no idea, right? The trials and tribulations as a girl. But I do know this. I have a daughter,
Yeah.
and she's brilliant. She's 15. She's beautiful. And I don't want her to walk into a program where people are like, oh, you're pretty or something, and they trivialize her because she got there because whatever. I'm like, you need this. This is the prettiest part of you anyway.
Yeah.
Make that rock hard, make that solid as hell, because you need women that are blocking and attacking in this space, because you guys have a major impact on what we're doing. It's just, how do you rev that engine up? How do you feel that that's part of your call to action or mission or duty?
I think it's become that. It was, never
In spite of
intentionally,
wanting
and
it?
in spite. I mean, I didn't. It was just never a. It was never a part of me. Like I remember starting in this industry and looking at somebody, a mentor, right? And I thought to myself, well, they can do this. Like I certainly can figure this
Sure.
out, right? Like, but I used to have to tell myself that over and over and over
They can
again.
do it, I can't do.
Yeah. Why can't I?
I
Right.
love
But
that.
like you have to like mentally tell yourself that because it can get hard and it will get hard. And if you don't have that resilience, right? And the other thing is to when people say things to you, you have to understand that most of the time it's not about you.
Yeah, it's about what they're.
Whatever. And I think if those two things, like I can do this, I am good enough, right? That kind of self-talk and also like from your family or your close friends or a mentor helps. And then the other piece is just don't take it so personally, right? Because it's about them, not you.
How did you learn that? I mean, I can't agree with you more, but how did you discover that? Because at first, we're wired inherently. Like, it's in the
Yeah,
tenets of our psychology to not know that.
a lot of things, I think time, and I think a lot of things have happened in my career, I mean, I've had all the comments, all the things. I used to work on construction sites, right?
Sure.
I've gone through all of it, and sometimes I did take it, And if I could go back to my younger version of myself, I wish I would have said something at that time. I didn't, and so I internalized it and took it personally. So I think I trained myself to just go, you know what, that's your problem, not mine. And if it crosses the line, now I address it. But also because I know I can. And that's what I think, there's a couple people I mentor in the industry, and that's what I tell them. I'm like, just keep asking why. And I did have a mentor one time, and something happened, and, I was being mansplained, to use your word, in a
It's
meeting.
not mine.
Shocking.
I know. There was a lady that I was telling her something once. She goes, "Look, Kirk," and she was all messing with me. She goes, "Don't you mansplain that stuff
Yeah,
to me." I was
yeah.
like, "Damn, I
Yeah.
never." Is that the worst word to be told as a
Yeah.
dude, that you're mansplaining? I'm like, I don't even know what that means, but I know I don't like what
No,
you're
no,
saying.
no, no.
And she was just messing with me, but go ahead.
No, we were in a meeting, and I was just like, I went in this maybe 6-7 years ago. Like, why is this still happening? Right? Like, this is so frustrating. And she was gonna retire soon, so she was at the end of the career, and you know what she told me? Well, this is just how it's always been. And I'm
Ooh.
like, oh no, oh no. Well, this is not how it's going to be. And I think that might have been the moment where I said, this is not how this is going to work, right?
That's good.
Because it shouldn't be like that, right? And we have a long ways to go, right? I mean, I think what people can do is when, there's people that maybe aren't as quiet or not as comfortable being the center of attention to make sure they're included, right? And be asked their opinion versus just assuming that they're, they don't have anything to say.
Have you seen like a standard theme that not plagues, but it's, infectious to the trials or tribulations that women in general have just in this industry? Because I can't speak to the pressures that are imposed on other verticals because I just don't understand, how to read those market trends, I guess, as well. But I see in our space, I think that there's an awareness. Would you agree that there's like, I think people realize like, hey man, we got to do better than this. And that's everybody.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of powerful women that, come together and, their voice, their collective voice is as a choir sings louder than one or two people that are fighting for that. Have you found that there's a strong enough mentor program that exists? Like how about this? How would the next Brittany at Arizona State who's discovering, kind of, that's what we do. We accidentally discover certain things and it's trial and error. What kind of mentor can you be for those people? What would have happened if you had that many years ago?
A lot different.
Like what?
I just think, most of my mentors are men.
Is that good or bad?
It's good. I think there's I have mentors that I think I don't want to be like that, but they're great mentors, right? Because they taught me something. And I have mentors, but I mean, the industry is such that I would say majority of my mentors are men. And so to have a mentor that is a female and you're a female, you just relate in a different way with those people. And so I don't know that we have any real, we have WIMCO, we have some women's groups, but not a real big mentorship program in data centers, right, for women. I
don't know why that is. I was watching something, like Bill Burr once did this comedy thing, and I'm a big comedy fan, and he was talking about, obviously it's a joke, but he's talking about the women. He's like, hey, I blame you for not having more in the WNBA. You women wanted this team, but nobody's going to watch the tickets. It's, and for me, I was trying to create something. I have these, half my staff is former military, right?
Yeah.
So let's say I have 50 people right now or whatever. Half of them are military, but the other half think like they're paramilitary type mindsets anyways. And what I have learned is, I have a lady that was one of our very first veteran. We have a program called OVITA, Overwatch Veteran Transition Apprenticeship. So that means when you are coming out of the military, you don't have to be an Air Force Power Gen Pro or Navy submariner or any of those. There are amazing skills and traits that you learn in the military that transcend any industry, any vertical. And I've learned that I can apply a subject of specialty to someone based on what they did in the military, and they have a higher likelihood of being either successful or failing at it based on the way that they were conditioned or their thought cycle was trained while being in the military. Military does an amazing job of training us at, certain things, machinery, weapon tech, but it really is reteaching you how to learn is what the military does, in my opinion. And in that space, I have very assertive women, right, that are used to dealing with life and death, so they don't get caught up in the optics of, like, when you were in the military, at least when I was in, I can honestly tell you that no one ever gave a shit about your sexual orientation, your religion, or I would say the only still living, breathing thing that anybody would ever be able to scratch the pain or pick at would always be like, well, that's a woman. And it was more, not based on capability.
No.
You're not going to find dudes, world heavyweight champions of the world, those are all the women that, my thing is, it's not because they're not capable. It's because they are so capable that they could dismantle and destroy anything at any time they wanted to, right? Because you can.
Yeah.
And the women that I had on my team, I'm sitting down, I'm like, hey, listen, I think I was talking to Crosby, and he's really doing an amazing job of trying to manage his entire CM staff. He has a daughter. She's just getting ready to graduate UT. I met her this week at the conference. She's got an engineering background, and she could do anything, right? And if your dad's Chris Crosby too, you got to imagine she's got a high degree of confidence, and she should. And that's what he wanted. We wanted to raise daughters that are going to be. There's no role for them to play except they could be a leader too. And my daughter and I had the conversation about how you don't just have to lead women; you could lead men too. It's not like So to your point, because you're like, hey, some of my mentors are men. I'm like, well, it's easy to, I can have mentors that are women, and
Yeah.
that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The thing that I was telling these ladies is like, oh, hey, how can I be more helpful? Because I'm spending time with Chris or other people. I'm like, do I do enough to help, my community that is most near and dear to me is veterans. They come first. A few weeks ago, we made a decision to hire a guy that's coming. He fled the Civil War in Liberia.
Wow.
And imagine like waking up in the middle of the night and you have a tyrant dictator that's just, he wanted to go out and fly his helicopter that night and just start shooting random stuff. I can't imagine living it like that, but you can, because you lived in Israel and you lived miles from the Gaza. So you understand how fragile, you are living with daily reminders of mortality.
Yeah.
Those cultures understand that. Well, these ladies were like, I was like, hey, maybe we should do some things. What can I be doing better? Because I don't really think I'm the best guy to make a decision on what I should be doing more for helping women. I need them to tell me how and they're like, they were almost like offended. They're like, listen, do not, like, we will fight through the mud and the blood and the beard, just like all the guys had to do. And we will get here just like you guys did. And we don't need no shit from anybody type of thing. So there's those girls too, right? And I'm like, well, do you want me to do something on this? And they're like, if that's going to make you feel better, if you feel you need something, they're like, we don't need you guys helping us tell us how to do this. We're going to rally these troops. And one of these ladies is awesome. She's like, all you bitches are going to work for me one day anyway. And I was like, that's the type of leader I need. That's the command presence you want on a construction trailer. Do you think guys are going to be like, no, can't do that. I'm going to be like, thank you. We're like anybody else. We just want to either lead or be led.
Yeah.
Give me someone that could teach me, make me better. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
What's your background?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's probably two different kinds. Like you said, there's different people, different perspectives.
So how do you grow it? Is it like mentoring more women, or do you have to start mentoring more guys too?
I think it's both, right? I mean, I've had people that worked for me that they clearly are uncomfortable, right? Which I think is very interesting.
What makes them uncomfortable?
I don't know. I never could have really quite figured it out, but you could see the uncomfortableness, right? And
is it like a masculine?
I don't know.
All right. It's their thing.
It's their thing.
Yeah.
But like, I'm just using that as an example of like, but then you mentor men, but I think you have to be open too, right? To have the conversation, to help, But
you can kind of flesh that out pretty quick, right? I mean, if they're genuinely professional.
Yeah.
They don't care where the right truth comes from. They just want it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They're objective.
Yeah.
It's if they're not at that level, then they're professionally not mature enough to be working at that level.
Yeah.
Do you get it?
Yeah.
I think there are people that are often in roles that they may have the experience to be there because they've done something for X amount of years or volume, but they are not professionally mature enough because someone didn't mentor them and teach them those blind spots.
Yeah.
So where do we find those gaps and how do we fix them?
Yeah. I wish I had like a silver bullet. I have no idea. I've been thinking about this last 6 months, what I can do more. And, I mentor people but that's you
can only touch, you can only scale so much.
So what can we do better? I think,
there's the WIMCOs, right? That's a collective, but
but
how do we leverage, we have multiple platforms. You got conferences.
Yeah.
What do you need to transform this?
I think there has to be more of us that are out there and visible, right? Which this, right, is out of my comfort zone, I would say. And I think that's really important, like for other people to understand, is speaking at conferences, podcasts, if I do like, a DCD, speaking, whatever, even if it's like no camera, it's out of my comfort zone. But I'm pushing myself because I think it's really important that there's other women out there, right, representing and showing that the data center industry is not just all men, right? Like
not at all.
And I think there's not a lot of visibility, right?
I think that it's safe too. It's safe for them to try to take that risk.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you, right? I mean, like, there's no industry that's growing as aggressively as ours.
No.
Up over now, the math. I mean, and we are still in our infancy, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So when I say those things, I mean, like, why wouldn't you come into this space, regardless of your gender or whatever, when you know that this is one of those industries where experience is not as important as character, right? And I mean that because...
Well, you proved it, right? Like with folks that you brought into the industry.
100%. I mean, like, but I mean, it's it's not because of them. It's because of us as consumers of data. All the eyeball content, video caching that flows back into these, the on-ramp to the cloud or whatever it's called. That stuff is driven by us, the consumer. And I don't remember the last time someone needed less technology. In fact, it's all moving the other direction with AR and VR and stuff. So you have an industry that doesn't limit you based on the amount of experience you have, because the way that even you are building data centers where you're at now is different than what you were doing 3, 6, 9, 12 months ago, let alone what it's going to be 3, 6, 9, 12 months from now. So really what you need is someone who has a high engine, high aptitude, and they got thick skin, and they're ready to go through the crucible and be pressure tested, because we all have to start from somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? You need those shitty programs.
Oh, yeah.
To callous the brain, right? You learn more from those. There's got to be programs of conflict that you're just like, you have to see what your limits are.
Yeah.
And those projects
you have to be pushed.
But you need mentors when you do it, right?
Yeah.
So did you have one when you were going through your hardest programs?
Yeah, I had a couple. Probably 2 distinctive ones, right? And that, like, when I say Intel kind of shaped that, both, worked at Intel and were senior leaders, and I still talk to them. And so
that's great.
When I made the transition from Intel to Microsoft, it was a big deal, right? And I went.
That's a big
I thought
transition.
I would be there. I never thought I would leave Intel.
Why did you leave? I mean, people don't always leave because they don't like people. Maybe it's opportunity.
Opportunity, right? I will never forget this conversation, and I can say the name, but I went to lunch with Brian Matson, and he's like, Brittany, he was at Microsoft, and we were talking about me maybe going there, and he's like, if you don't leave, you're never gonna leave. You're never gonna leave. And he's like, you've been there for so long that if you don't leave, and I had just gotten back from Israel, like maybe 9 months I was back, and I thought, oh man. And Jeff's, my husband's based out of Arizona. I'm like, logistically, this seems really tough. Well, I go there and I realize, right, at this time, Microsoft was a lot smaller than it is now, right?
Oh, it's monstrous now. Yeah.
Now it's monstrous. Like, it was a lot smaller. And I went there and I realized every skill that I learned at Intel is totally translated to data centers. And I had been in a data center at Intel, which is not like data centers here.
It's a closet, yeah.
Yeah. And I remember a guy that still now works for me. My first data center tour was like a Cyrus One building in Texas. And I knew nothing about data centers. Zero. I mean, I knew construction, I knew MVP, I didn't understand it. So I walked up to him and he was friendly.
Is it at Cyrus One?
Yeah, it was Cyrus One.
Was it Laramie?
No.
Oh, Hayden. John Hayden, probably.
No, he works for me now.
Oh, I was like, those 2 guys are the most unassuming guys they approached.
And I said, I don't know anything about data centers. And he's like, all right, let me show you.
Isn't that cool?
But see, if I wasn't honest and open, then I wouldn't have gotten that experience to learn, right? And I would constantly say, okay, I don't know what you're saying, right? To an engineer, right? Can you please explain it to me so I really can understand? But I'm very open about it, right? Like I manage engineering. I'm not going to be the one that sits there and figures out some technical issue with you, but can certainly help you look at the bigger picture. And, I have those conversations, but I think that shows like I have to show some vulnerability when you get into this industry. And I think, the leaders that I had showed that to me. And so that's why I continue to do it.
That makes a ton of sense, actually. So when you were going back, so you came back from Israel, came back to Arizona, and somehow someone said, hey, you want to do this? And you're like, you know what? If I don't do it now, I won't ever do it. So
it was such a leap of faith, right?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't as big, as it is now, right? And no one knew the growth that was going to happen in this industry. I don't think we could have I think we knew it was going to grow, but to this extent?
Oh yeah, no, I asked everybody. Like the conference this week, there's some fairly, every industry has celebrities, and there's guys that are celebrities and girls that are celebrities too, right? And I get a chance to talk to a lot of them, so I always ask them, like, these are the smartest ones that we identify in our space as the thought leaders. So I'm
Yeah.
like, why wouldn't I ask them first? I mean, they're the first ones I asked. Like, how do you read the tea leaves? Like, how, like 5 years ago, did you see this that's happening right now? Even like, do you remember when like 1 megawatt deals were a big deal?
Yeah.
And now, like, people are like, I pick my teeth with anything less than 6 megs or something. And I was like, what? Like, were you there for the state of the industry when the guys from JLL were talking about like market by market overview, and they were talking about it has grown this cavalier? I mean, Andy Svengros of JLL and I used to work together at HP, UIP long
Yeah.
ago, and just a really cerebral guy, and really is a incredible professional in understanding the market scape
Yeah.
for what we do. He's just very passionate about that, and I love that because I could ask him a question, and I know that he's close. He's tight in orbit with the facts. And he said there was the example he gave on stage yesterday was, yeah, there's a provider that has, they build an 8 megawatt chunks, and the client only wanted 5, and they're like, well, you could take 8 or nothing. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Those days are like,
No.
well, look, we're going to sell all, whatever. So
Yeah.
the days where as the enterprise end user, you could horse trade.
Yeah.
Like when you're at Microsoft, probably, you're like, hey, I want this and that. And people would jump over anything, make any concession for you.
Yeah.
Now they're like,
Annie.
that's not a really big enough deal. Sorry.
Yeah.
Isn't that
And
crazy?
you get to pick them now, which is even more like,
Yeah, you get to choose which. Not only that, but I also think that the ecosystem, the supply chain, because that's where everybody's headaches was at. But if you're a UPS manufacturer and there's a arbitrary number here, 40 megawatt deal, that's a lot of boxes. Well, they can't do that for all 3 of those companies that are bidding on that program. So whichever one has line of sight to that supply chain has a higher likelihood of being able to reduce their risk factor enough to make that client make a purchasing decision in their favor.
Yeah.
Right? So in some cases, if you can't get the gear, you can't win the deals. And the supply chain, I've been in those meetings too, where there are people that work for big box manufacturers. Like, we're talking about a client that never pays us on time, or they pay us, late, or they commoditize us down to where we're making nothing. And now there's another group that will pay us 5 days early, or, doesn't
Yeah.
nail us to where we're
That will
nothing.
put, pay half up front, right?
Yeah.
Like it's
Well, if
just, again,
the way they treat them.
yeah, it's all about the relationships. And I mean,
agree.
I've been talking to a lot of them, and they said to me, if you can just like screaming and yelling at me is not going to make you go faster, right? It almost makes me do the opposite, right? Because they have a choice, and they only have so much capacity.
What are you seeing? Like, are you seeing resistance on labor where they're like, I mean, you're a huge shop. We haven't even got, we're still just focused on you. We're going to package this stuff a little bit more before we get into the other part. Because as I said, like, I don't know you. We've never met before, right?
No.
So like when people always ask me like, how long do you know these people? I'm like, you don't get it. I try to invite, obviously there are people on this podcast I know, but I want to meet more people. And it's not for me. Like, even the conference, that's not my conference. I don't use that to make money. We throw everything back into that conference as much as we can, or we make it to where we could donate as much as we can.
Yeah.
That's like the industry's conference. That's the people's conference is what we try to call it. And this podcast is for, there are going to be people that want to do work with your company. They just don't even know how to engage you.
Yeah.
And listen, you need people in this industry because like my first question was like, what are you seeing? I remember the first time I was building in Virginia. It's not like there's 15 electrical contractors in a holding pattern begging for your work.
No.
You basically have to sell into them and convince them why they should go dump 100 to 400 people on your project.
Yeah.
Because they're like, listen, why would I go work for you when I could do this and this and this? Because there's not an unlimited amount of labor.
Yeah. No.
So they get to choose. They're picking who they want to go put their teams behind. That was pretty profound for me. And that was a few years ago before we
Before
started.
it really got, yeah.
So it's even worse now.
It's even worse now.
What do you see and how do you manage those things? Like, what are you seeing from your, because we're still at Microsoft, so I know I'm all over the place, but tell me what you're seeing in your transition as a professional too, because that's what gives you your value as a mentor, right?
Yeah.
It's like you've seen these multiple cyclical phases of change.
Yeah. I think and right now in NTT in the last couple of years, the goal was, right? So like I had 3 goals, right? One was to create a culture that people really wanted to come work at, right? I mean, people get burnt out at some of the big hyperscalers. People get burnt out at colos, right? because it was not people focused, right? It just kind of go through the motions, right? So that was like the biggest thing. And I think we have done that, like, to, and it's constantly evolving. But when I got there, right, most of it, the construction team was outsourced. There was not a lot of FTEs.
Oh, at Raging?
Yeah.
Well, I thought that they had their own construction team
Yeah, and
internal
then
forever.
and
Oh,
then
they
they
rotated the other way?
Uh-huh.
Interesting. And that was before the acquisition of NTT or after?
During.
Okay.
Yeah. So they went the other way. And so the construction team, there was maybe 1 or 2 FTEs, right?
So they went from self-performing basically everything to 2 FTEs and outsourcing the rest of like owners reps? Or... Well, that's very traditional in this industry.
It's fine, right? Yeah. I had a different view because of what I knew the scale was going to be. And so, it was a journey to kind of bring some of it in-house and, kind of build that skill and the maturity inside the company to be able to prepare, right, to be doing.
Because now you're investing in people.
Yeah, because now we're investing in people. So we, and really reorganized, built the team. So it was culture, team. And the third one was stop changing everything all the time.
Because everyone's iterative. They're like, oh,
iterative. Yeah. And so now, once we did those 3 things, like, we're standard, right? We, it's really evolved and really grown to where now some of the scale that we're seeing is a lot, but I really think we're prepared. And, my team and I were talking about, like, if we didn't do this 2 years ago, what in the world would,
How, yeah.
And I think that's all happening a lot in the industry, right? There's been a lot of change, a lot of movement, right? And then now, instead of building 40 megawatt data centers, people are building 100 megawatt data centers, right? That's a whole different scale, right, than we were talking about a couple of years ago, or 3 or 4 years ago. So.
How did we get to that, though? Because the beauty about, like, this week for me, I'm exhausted, not because, you get home late, but it's because I also, like, I get a chance to talk to a lot of people, and you get more out of them. Like you've done podcasts before, right? This isn't your first podcast, but is it different?
Yeah, it's weird.
What's different?
I think it's just more of a conversation than.
And we're sitting in front, face to face.
Yeah.
It's important enough for us to talk about because we're sitting right here,
yeah.
right? And I think that when you have that, it's a more meaningful exchange. You're going to scratch the pain a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
So when you go into what you're doing, did you have, like, this knowledge? Did someone help coach you on those things too? Did you have resistance from your leadership team because you're like, there's a storm coming and we got to be ready. And it doesn't scale economically if I outsource all of my engineering. Maybe I should have some of that. And not the stamp your drawings.
Yeah. But
when you're trying to change, there are those that want more of the same, just a greater volume of it. And there are those that want better.
Yeah.
Were you finding that when you went to NTT, you were allowed to drive better?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was a part of the decision for me to go there. So I think that's also the thing, right? And I learned this over time, right? If you're going to make a career move or a change, make sure you know what you're negotiating up front, right? And make sure you know what you're walking into, right?
Because when you went to Microsoft, it's a good lesson learned, though.
It was, right? Because when I went to Microsoft, right, everything changed. Yeah. Within 2 months of me being there, the people that hired me, the people that I had connected, they all left, right? And so, and then I'm, in this role that I didn't, so it was good.
Good pressure.
Good pressure, good experience, in even a different role inside a different company, right? You have to negotiate for yourself, right? And so
but you only learn to do that when you accidentally, you're like, damn, I left something on the table.
Yeah, I didn't ask for that. And it's not about, obviously, the money part, but it's more about what do you need to do to help the company, right? And what do you need support on? And if you're not clear on that, right, when you're making the transition, then you might not want to make that transition, right? Because so it was never a problem for me because I kind of understood what the issues were and what we needed to do before I even started. And so there was an alignment on what the path was. And so, you don't get resistance, but if you don't do some of that upfront socializing, it's another skill, right? If you're not socializing thoughts or, where you think we should head, and you just think that everybody's going to do what you think is the best thing to do because, you have a title of something, that's not how it works.
I had a conversation this week with people at the conference, and one was a senior guy, and he was asking me something like, "Oh, it's when I was at Aligned and I was their EVP, their platform.
Yeah.
I felt like I was in sales.
Yeah.
I was selling internally to my resources to make sure that they were inspired and focused and knew exactly what the expectations were. And I was selling to the ecosystem, being like, guys, man, I can't compete on the price point and the economy of scale with an NTT or a Cyrus or whoever. So how do I get more favorable terms? Maybe I pay you 10 days faster, or, you have to be creative because it's David versus Goliath. And I guess my thing was, I was stunned to learn how much I was always selling, because then you're selling to the investment committee to go get your money so you can run your programs.
Always.
And you have guys, you're like, hey, I'm going to get you that PO by this. And it never happens at that time, And so you're selling them to, keep that team together. I still need it.
Yeah.
You're just constantly communicating and selling, So when you were at Microsoft, were you learning those skills there? Or were you learning, those skills that you were refining from already getting them from Intel?
I think so. I think it's just time, right? And honestly, like, we don't know each other. I'm pretty transparent, right? I try to explain why first and then say, this is what I think we need to do. And I'm also pretty, I don't really give up easily. So, but it's constant, right? Like, and that's my whole job now.
It's
right?
just constant.
I'm not sitting there like I used to, right? Like writing a contract or, doing a kickoff with the general contractor, whatever I used to do, in our careers. Literally, my whole job is to make sure that we have a vision and a path and everybody's aligned, and I go get the funding that the team needs to do their job.
Which is actually the most confrontational and friction area, right? Because everything begins and ends with that finance, and those people don't release those dollars unless they have a pretty good understanding of where they're going and how they're being managed.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pressure on that, right? So in the time that, like, how long were you at Microsoft for?
5 years. Almost 5 years.
Dude, that's, so you did like 6 with Intel, 5 with Microsoft?
No, Intel was almost 10 years.
Dang. Okay, so, and then Microsoft, and then you went from there
to NTT.
I think that even you've been conditioned where everyone in your role there is like, fuck, everyone just wants a piece of something, and I don't have time for everybody. And I think I was just more looking at the opportunity to, I identify these companies in industry that are making a difference, and I want to understand them more. And I can understand how that's some complete stranger calling you, and you're like, why do I want to spend time with this person and talk to him? But does this understand, or now having been to the conference for the first time and sitting here on this podcast now, does it make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Do you see why it's important for the industry?
Yeah.
Because your story is going to have a more profound impact on more people than mine. Yeah. And those people are looking for leadership. I mean, we're all starving for it. We want to lead or be led. And I think that this is something that hopefully can, this is my first female podcast, and it's not by design. It's not because I just wanted a bunch of old white dudes up here. Sadly, it's because I haven't been able to find a way to communicate to the powerful women in this industry that this is a safe environment that they could come onto. Yeah. And that was the genesis behind this first one, right? Yeah. Because there's so much more into this. And I'm hoping that even if there's a few, there hopefully will be some people where this podcast reaches back to the, Naval Station San Diego or Virginia, or, Fort Hood. And there are going to be men and women, civilian or military, that are hopefully listening and realizing, like, listen, that's a bad bitch. How do I figure out that? How do I be like that? How do I, surround myself in an environment where I'm constantly uncomfortable, I'm pressure tested and forced to prove myself in a way that, let's face it, sometimes we aren't as challenged. No. And how do I do it in a way in which I don't compromise one thing for the other? My ability to be productive while maintaining the integrity of, the amount of respect I gain. How has navigating through that made you a better person or changed you in any way?
I think I've just, I'm a lot more patient with myself, right? So there's one thing that I think I've figured out is, I don't have to always know the answer. I don't always have to be comfortable in what I'm doing. I think that a lot of people won't do things because, they don't know all the answers. We were talking about this earlier, right? Like, I don't know what I surround myself with an environment where most people know way more than me, frankly, about data centers.
Take a number. Yeah.
Right? Take a number.
There was a time where we were all SMEs and now we're
strategists.
Like,
and I'm okay with it, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the journey has been tough in some days, like really tough some days. Really constantly learning things. I'm renovating a part of the house in Michigan, and a contractor comes over and he wants to go through all these details, right, with me.
Wrong person to do that with, probably.
And I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. And
He's
I'm
like, this blonde girl probably doesn't know shit. Let me just.
Yeah. And it's cool, totally cool. I'm like, yeah, this is what we should do, blah, blah. And this just happened last weekend. 30 minutes later, he comes into the room and I'm like working. He's like, are you always this chill? Like, are you always this calm? Like, is everything okay? And I'm like, yeah. But I wasn't always like that, right? I mean, I had like almost debilitating anxiety in college. Right?
Interesting.
Where I refused to go on medication. Mm-hmm. So I started meditating and doing yoga.
Good for you.
And Reiki and different things
That's
to
awesome.
help me.
Yeah.
Right. But that's how I coped. And then I continue that journey to the point now where it's when I'm riled, right?
Now you know how to respond.
I know how to respond.
Coping skill.
Coping skill, right? But it wasn't always like that. And so I think that, if I look back up my career, lots of hard work, lots of lessons, lots of tough things that have happened. And if I didn't have a support system or constantly kind of told myself you got this, you'll figure this out, right? This is not gonna impact, everything in your life, right? Because you remember when you were young, right? And it was so difficult. Something would happen on a project, right? And it was
you were your own worst enemy.
Yeah.
You were freaking out. I mean,
I'm definitely getting fired.
When you are left to your own thoughts,
yeah,
it turns out we are the worst.
We are the worst.
All right, so that's where a lot of that anxiety and depression stems from. And we always say this. We started this, some of the things we do because we're battling PTSD because PTSD seems to be what we could tie back most of suicide to. Then we learned that it's not just veterans or combat, infantry guys that are getting. I mean, some of the most amazing people I had on my team. The first Ovita candidates I hired was an aviation boatswain's mate from the Navy, and she had zero experience. And then when I hired her, I said, "Look, you won't even be with me in 2 years from now. It's not because we're bad people, but you will outgrow me because your hunger to become better exceeds our capability to grow you because we're a small company." It made more sense to send her off to Rosedale with 5,000 people and a million places to go. We also had a damage controlman, and this lady was almost the first time we talked. She's like, "Look, I don't have any experience. I can't do this." I'm like, "You can. I need you to have coping skills to where." And she goes, "Look, like all of us, we all have anxiety.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how high in rank you get.
No.
In fact, I would argue that it's even worse for the higher you go because you are expected to be tougher.
Yeah.
And to not be freaked out emotionally.
Yeah.
But you are bearing the heavier burden of the responsibility either economically or for the souls you manage and lead. And
but
train.
What about as a female, right? You think about this idea of I can't have emotions or I have to be super tough.
It's tough.
I think I've done the opposite, right? I had a guy on my team leave, super great opportunity. I was so happy for him. I'm in staff meeting, right? And you people that work with you or you work with them, you develop a relationship, and I'm like, thanks for everything. And all of a sudden, I just start crying. And
because he's family.
But maybe 10 years ago, oh my God, I would have been horrified. Right? Right?
Yeah.
In a professional environment.
No, it's beautiful.
But I think if I am who I am.
Yeah, you cared.
And I care. And
it's awesome, man.
But I think, it's not like that for everybody. And I think a lot of people, right, I'm somebody when I'm at home and I'm somebody that I'm at work.
Yeah, two different people.
Especially in this industry when you're a female, right? Because you feel I'm generalizing. I think I used to feel I had to be tougher. I had to be, more. But when I figured out that I just had to be myself,
That's it.
that's it.
It's because it's all bullshit. Because like, listen, there's dudes that I have conversations with. I'll get emotional. They'll get emotional.
Yeah.
Like, why am I supposed to be leaking from my eyeballs? I'm a big, tough combat guy.
Yeah.
I'm like, I get it.
Yeah.
Dude, this industry I think is awesome because it brings out the highest level of passion.
Yeah.
I have amazing friends. There's a guy that I brought in from the conference. If you saw, we had people run around in uniforms
Yeah.
because we are going to be adding more to that theme. And I brought in a guy that I went to submarine school. He's a master chief in the Navy, exceptional guy. And he and I, he's like just as passionate about me for, as I am for this industry as he is for the military. And we get messy all the time with that stuff. And he was saying something, he goes, no. And I think that's why his men love him and they know that genuinely we're still just people.
Yeah.
We're still just people. And we treat our team as a family. Like that's my brother and sister. And we are our brother and sister's keeper. So if not us, who is going to mentor and grow and train these people? There are phases, though, that we tell them deliberately, like, look, we will put you in the crucible. We will put you there knowing that you're going to struggle because that struggle has to be real.
Yeah.
And you'll not arrive to what the full appreciation or meaning of that message or learning or that lesson is until you've struggled with friction.
Yeah.
But once you are, then maybe it's an empathy thing, but we are all on the same sheet of music at that point.
Yeah.
And now you realize, like, can we just, I fight with my family. It doesn't mean I'm firing, you're out of my life, brother.
Right.
You will, once they realize, like, okay, well, this is not a machine and I'm a piece of the cog and I could be, now they're like, okay, these people care.
Yeah.
And when they see you do that, just like if they see me do that in front of my team, they know that
we care.
We care. So I think that has the most profound impact on the bottom line.
Yeah, it does.
I think the way that we manage, lead, and love our teams have the greatest impact on managing the integrity of a schedule.
Yeah.
Or the budget. I think that it has to transcend beyond our teams. It has to be our partners too. I mean, there's partners that you can see them struggling. I'm like, okay, what happened here? It looks like you guys are all freaked out. What did we do? Did we take too much money off of the thing to where now you guys are
not profitable?
You feel like you can't make money and no one's going to be successful. Do you need me to pay you now? Like there's always something, but we invest into those people.
Yeah.
This whole industry is nothing but people.
Yeah.
So I think that there was a time where people were led based on we had the best design.
Yeah.
We had the most reliability. Now we're the most sustainable. Now we have the ability to deliver speed to market faster than anybody else. And now we have XYZ. But what was driving the market, I think, is really settling now on people.
Yeah.
Don't you agree?
Yeah. Because people have a choice, right?
Yes, you can't force them.
You can't force them, right? And
There's a lot of opportunity.
And we have a choice. We have a choice who we want to work with. We have a choice what we want to spend the majority of our days doing, right? And it was different, right? And I think that if you have experience in data center industry, I think you would agree. It's not hard to find a role, right, in this industry. Like, we are just
looking for good people.
There's not enough people, right? And so when that happens, right, they choose where they are, right? And that's a reflection of leadership, right? Because we're all similarly doing the same thing. We're all building data centers,
and
selling them, right? And
it is
that's
the same.
It's
To an
the same
SLA.
thing.
It's the same product. There's only so many different permutations.
Yeah, the world changes design. It looks a little different. Whatever. It's the same thing,
it
right?
Is.
I mean, it's the same box with a bunch of electrical and cooling. I don't oversimplify it.
But people are making purchasing decisions sometimes, obviously based on schedule or cost. But it's really confidence and comfort and like, is this? I always hear this like over the last few days. It's great because we have these fishbowl incubators that I get to hear, and everyone's like, is that a person that if I called at 2 a.m, if there was an emergency, they would take my call? And that almost is how everything got trivialized down to. Like, is this the person that I could call at 2 a.m? But, I agree with you 100%. I think that people could choose. So now, just like how when you're building in Virginia, you got to go sell into these contractors. Be like, let me tell you why you don't want to work for my competition and bring your labor force here. I think that internally we sell because the productivity of an employee who thinks that like I have to do this versus the productivity of an employee that says I get to do this. And if you have that culture, one of them is going to put a little bit more wood behind the arrow, So this is what I'd say. Like, I have a lot of questions still. So this is going to have to be like a 2-part podcast at some
Okay.
point. We don't have to do it immediately,
Yeah.
but at some point you're going to have to come back, right?
Okay.
Because there is amazing things you're doing. I was joking with you on the ride here. I was like, yeah, whatever you guys are doing at NTT is like the best kept secret. You guys are killing it, you know? But the reality is the best kept secret is you may be one of the largest data center providers in the world.
Yeah.
But there has been so many changes that have happened with your guys' organization, which is all good and healthy.
Yeah.
But if that message isn't being explained, not just from your marketing team, but from your team and the people in the trenches in the field that are in orbit around the ecosystems, if you don't have that message and that narrative created, then people leave it to themselves to decide what it is, and that sometimes is not always right.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful, right? You have to sell internal to the team, internal to the industry.
Yeah.
And then you're selling external to, your customers, whoever those are. I think that there's a lot of evolving shifts. Do you feel like it's at a greater advantage, all the lessons you've had to date to now? Like, do you feel like you've arrived to a plateau of something now where you get to take all of those years of?
Yeah, I mean, all the years, but I constantly am learning something different, right? And so I think once I feel like I've maybe not being pushed, right? Or pushing myself or trying something new, that's typically when I do something different, right? Or I'll...
Is it because you just feel like you're getting too comfortable and you're like, I have to...
I have to keep going and learning and growing and, and I'm learning so much right now, right? I mean, coming from a company that was buying things to a company that's selling things, right?
Yeah.
It's just such a different shift of mentality and a different perspective that I'm learning, right? And, signing a lease on this side, buying it on this side is very different.
But you have the optics where you could, you know how to interpret it as the buyer.
Yeah.
So now you know how to maybe communicate as the seller.
Yeah, which is really interesting, right? Because I didn't, when there was a year at Microsoft that I went and did leases, right? And I was on the buying side, and I didn't know anything about a lease contract, right? I'm from construction.
Yeah.
Right? I know about supply chain. I know about contracts. And I was like, oh, okay. And there was a, contract in Israel. So I ended up, because of my background, having to go to Israel and help secure a lease. But I didn't know anything about a lease contract. Figured it out, came back, was in leases, great fun, figured out leasing, right? And on that side. But my passion is always construction and supply chain. So when this opportunity came up, I was like, that's
Get to
pretty
learn
cool.
something new.
Because I can take this part of everything that I've learned, construction, and what was more important to me is that in organizations, and usually construction's in one organization and probably engineering's in another organization, and then you have like central supply chain, right? And you know how this works. We all have to work together for it to actually work.
Yeah.
For us to actually build something. Well, it was all in one in NTT. And I thought that was such an opportunity that I hadn't seen, right? To be able to have a cohesive team. And it's not like, well, engineering made this decision, so this is what's going to happen. We're all one team. Mm-hmm. And so that was one of the big reasons. And then, I got to see both sides, but then I could leverage all the knowledge that I had at Microsoft. And I was maybe terrified, right? Because here I am working at Intel and Microsoft, two of the biggest companies in the world, and NTT is a large company.
Mm-hmm. They're massive. People just don't realize how massive they are.
Understand, right?
Billions
and that's
of
why
dollars.
I made that move, because I thought this is like a good move. I'm used to large companies,
Yeah.
I can function in those.
It's hard to navigate in those ones.
It's hard, but I know I'm used to that. And so that's why I made that move. It was very intentional because it was still a large company, right? So there was some comfort there for me, although it was super challenging. And so now to look back at what we've done as NTT, right? Like, and the growth, right? That we're doing.
It's smart.
It's just...
I think that this is an awesome podcast,
Yeah.
and this is what I was missing. I need to get more, because you guys have the optics in which you view the industry is massively different from mine. Not just because of the gender, but because everybody has started from somewhere. I started only in the ecosystem. I was a UPS service engineer, This is what I would say is when I've found that when we have these conversations,
Yeah.
because I get a fair amount of texts from people I don't know, or LinkedIn messages or something,
Yeah.
but people will hear this and you don't know.
Yeah.
You have no idea the impact you're going to make on someone with this message. There could be very well some lady who's in college right now or just graduated and has been battling anxiety too, and she
Yeah.
didn't realize that you could weaponize it. You could, hey man, that could be debilitating, and
Yeah.
you could need medication, or you could be like, look, I could go a different route, and I could get hard mentally, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna make myself get comfortable in these situations
Yeah.
until it's not gonna ever get easier. I'll just get stronger to where it just doesn't seem as hard, and then
Yeah.
when I've got comfortable with that scenario, then I continue to. But that's something that, as a woman in this space, you're not just talking to that woman in college. You're talking to the young man that just came in here too, who's one of my apprentices, who's like, so that's how I do it. I mean, what you did isn't a woman thing. It's a person thing,
It's a person.
right? Yeah. So, listen, I'll button this one up because I know I'm running you over, and you probably have a flight to catch. So I always try to ask 2 questions to people at the end, right? The first one is, what do you tell people you do? Yeah, it's hard, right? I'm in data centers. Well, if you're telling me, I could understand that. But when you run into someone on a plane and they're like, yeah, I work for JP Morgan, or I work for Western Union. I don't know. Like, I know what that is. That's finance. Or that's, when you run into people that you don't know, they're like, what do you do? What do you tell them?
I usually just say, I'm in tech.
Okay. Why do you say that?
It's just the easiest generic thing to say.
Because it's hard. Yeah.
It's
Because
hard to explain.
we need to fix that too.
Yeah.
I think that that's a barrier to entry. Why there's not more women in industry that, or veterans being adopted that are looking at this going, oh, so does tech? I could be in tech, or they're like, I don't know what data centers are, and might as well. I'm not into the flex capacitor.
I think when we explain it as like, the cloud. Oh yeah, I know the cloud.
Yeah, it's the home for it.
Yeah.
But like people, we have to do a better job. I'm going to create a marketing campaign. There's a thing that we created called Data Center Savage, and on that you'll see this whole marketing thing go out to where, I mean, we're not defining what it is, but I'm going to continue to ask people like you and people that are engaged with us on one of our platforms, be like, what is a data center? What do you do? And we're going to get to it where it's so easy that the whole industry will be able to explain it. And if we could do that, like, I'll never again have a DCAC conference where I don't invite, I give 5 free tickets to SMU or Baylor or Rice or UT or A&M or whatever, but we're going to start having 30, 40 college students in this thing too.
That's awesome.
We have to start earlier off. We have to make changes, right? And we can't just try to do more of the same. We have to reinvent it a little bit. So
disrupt it.
So that was the first question. Now, I think that was a weak ass answer. You have to step your game up, girl. I'm in tech. That's cheating.
Yeah.
So what about what's the message that you would give anybody? Like, I asked you when we were on a break, like, would you hire you right now?
Yeah.
Okay, but why? Or like, what is your message to the person that's listening, who could be a soldier, sailor, and airman sitting on a base? They could be someone sitting in the industry and just got here for the first year, and they know that they're in the data center industry, but they don't even really understand where they fit in that data center industry, right?
Yeah.
What would you tell these people? Because you've started with your professional career in semiconductor, and that's high tech, and you got into mission critical, which is, I guess, just tech, right? But you have this whole evolutional thing. What do you tell these people based on what your lessons learned? What's your advice to anybody if they're listening, and what do you want to tell them?
I always went back to what I used to tell myself, which is, I can do this too.
Nice.
And
that's a good message.
I think if you tell yourself that and you really believe it, you really can do it. And every opportunity that comes to you, take it, right? You don't have to fully take it, right? Like, but talk to the person. Go, research something, right? Like, just explore the industry in a way that, and it's okay. Like, if you come to a conference or you come to a place and you don't know everybody, it's okay. Just like, give yourself a goal. I'm going to talk to 3 people. Because most people, like, are approachable in this industry, I think.
A lot of nerds that are introverts, they want to talk. They just don't want to engage first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I agree with that. And listen, I got to be honest. That's a great example of why we needed you on this podcast, because your answer is actually the theme of this podcast now. Like, you have to believe in yourself.
Yeah.
And you're not ready. and you won't be until you get into it. There's no like, you can never wait. I'll be ready. You have to do it now.
Yeah, there's no recipe for, like,
And then you have to evolve.
you have to evolve and you want to learn and just keep doing it.
I love it. That's a great story. And that's a great message. And listen, to that end, I'm really thankful that you're here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm sorry it only took me 15 months of chasing you down.
No.
And you're giving me the Heisman. I don't blame you. I would too. I would say this. You got to come back.
Yeah.
Whenever you're ready, like, let's talk about it over the course of time. But realize this. There's so many more things that we could be doing that we're not doing that would have a meaningful impact on this industry.
Right.
We don't impact this industry only by what we do, day to day, but we have to create a better collective to get everybody in the same sheet of music.
Yeah. I love it.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
You
Thank
too.
you for making the trip.
Thank
okay.
you.
Have a great day. Safe
Thank
travels.
you.